Hi everyone, Jess here, Campaign Manager for Worth a Second Chance. I'm joined by Kerry White today, who is the Principal of Holy Family Catholic School in Adelaide. This is a little bit of a impromptu video that we're recording for you and for our webinar guest who unfortunately didn't get to hear from Kerry on the day as he was struck with a very legitimate emergency. One of the young people at the school was at risk of having COVID and so had to have a whole school closure on the day. So obviously Kerry had some stuff going on, wasn't able to join us, but is here today. So thank you so much for being with us, Kerry. And if you wouldn't mind just giving our audience a little intro about who you are and what your career's been like up until this point.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Jess. Yeah, it's a pleasure to join you. So I'm Kerry White, Principal of Holy Family Catholic School. And in my career, I've been principal at 3 other schools and also worked for a little while in Catholic Education SA. So, you know, it's my privilege to do the job that I do. I love doing it. And every day is a great day. And next year, we're looking forward in 2021 to some marvellous learning opportunities. So it's all go here at Holy Family.
I wanted to bring you back to the belonging, because I think that's sounds like one of the huge strengths of your school is that sense of community and belonging. And to bring it back to Worth a Second Chance, a lot of the young people we work with don't feel that they belong anywhere.
Yes.
Or maybe fall into communities where their sense of belonging is determined on some not so healthy things.
Yeah.
And so, you know, how have you been able to achieve that in your school? Because the reason I came in to contact you was that, you know, I saw you on the TV and in an amazing article that you had never expelled a student as your time as a principal. And for some people, that's quite revolutionary. So I wanted you to be able to speak to how that increases your sense of belonging and the well-being of your students.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that you know, in the trauma-informed aspect that we've learned, what we've realised is that, you know, going back to attachment theory and so on, that failure for children to attach to significant people in their lives is catastrophic for the child, and they end up with a diminished notion of self. So I think what we do here is that we embrace that Christian idea that, you know, people are basically good. And then from the Reggio idea that children are competent citizens from birth. So even in the womb, you know, they're listening, they're keying in, and they're keying into the positives and they're keying into the negatives. So you're right, when those children come to school who have been trauma affected, and they're the ones who may, in some environments, become, you know, suspended or expelled or whatever, excluded in some way, they start with the thesis, you don't like me. I know you guys don't like me. And so I've read about that, but I've also seen it in children's eyes. And, you know, like where the child comes to the door here, and that happens all day. They come here all day. They come in to see me, and they're looking to relate. I think they do relate to me, and they relate to our staff. And so it's not an accident that it happens here, that we, you know, I try to engender that sense that everyone's welcome here. And I think sometimes people, you know, teachers over time, they might say, you know, well, I think he cares more about the children than us. And in a way, it's kind of true. You know, I mean, I do care deeply about them, but we are the adults. We are in control. We're here to care. And so, you know, I'm quite unremitting in that regard for children. And I find that quite easy. And I think that, like, people say, where did that come from? I think I was like that as a teacher. So I was a classroom teacher for 10 years before I became a principal. And I think I operated in exactly the way I did all those years ago. And that just see children as basically competent. So yeah, it's been an easy situation for me. It's something I didn't sort of sit down and say, well, I'm not going to be punitive. I've just learned over the years that, you know, in every aspect of life, you know, you water the flowers, not the weeds. So, and I realise that when I'm working with people, whether they're a child, a teacher, or a parent, they already know. It's not for me to point out what the challenges are for them. They already know. you know. But what is refreshing is that if they meet someone that and we do use this as a strategy in our school. Every interaction I have in the school, I start with what we call the specks of gold. So people will come to me in an absolutely miserable state, and then I'll say to them, what's gone well today? And they kind of look at me and say, like, are you serious? You know, like, I'm here for this problem. But I don't let them get away with that. I say, let's find something today that went well. And so the child might say, oh, well, Sally said I look nice. I'll say, well, there you go. There's a positive. And often think it's a bit like a spoonful of sugar lets the medicine go down. It's kind of it's a good way to start. You know, if you start on a positive, it becomes cumulative. And people with almost, I think there's an innate desire for people to see the good, and you know they're looking for hope. But you know, you can go either of two ways. You can either go that positive orientation and promote a sense of gratitude, and that's one of our basic principles. You know, let's look at the things for which we are grateful.
Yeah.
And most of us, you know, like I remember thinking and talking to principals about, you know, oh, they don't have resources. And I remember saying to a friend of mine, you know, mate, I met a guy from Africa and he was so poor he couldn't afford chalk. I said, that's need. You know, like in Australia, relatively, we don't have that level. So everything is relative. But I think you're right, what you were saying about architecture earlier and spaces. I think over time I realised that access to resources is really important. I think that when I was a young teacher, I think, well, I can create something out of nothing. But there's a limit to that. I think when you have adequate resources, I think, so over time, the importance of resources has gone up.
Yeah.
I think purpose overall is the most important thing, having a sense of purpose, a clear idea. As I say, who you are, what your values are. And our values in our school are positive emotion, trust, and support. They are the three values. And we've honed those over time. We've realised, we've investigated them, we realise what they are. And they are at the basis of all of our success. When those values are in place, we are successful. Yeah, and this year, absolutely. In all the tests of things that have come our way, that's what I've seen people access those values. So then they've become virtues. Because values are what you talk about. Virtue, you know, as I say here, and our chairperson quoted me the other day, that culture is what people do when no one's looking. And I think that's what we've seen this year. So those values are core. You know, you need to know what do you believe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what I say. You know, coming back in this crisis, I've said, you know, we're in a world where there are very few black and whites. Overnight, that's happened. So where things which we previously said, well, that'll never happen, they've happened. So I think that's the role of education, is to prepare children and people for an uncertain world. And I think the best way of doing that, and I said that to our staff when we came back after our closure recently, I said, I cannot tell you what to do in every situation. But what I can advise you to do is to access those values, positive emotion, trust, and support, and interrogate your actions. So if what you're proposing to do is in line with those values, then that's what I'm asking you to do. And I find people respond to that. They know what you mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done all that groundwork in sort of nurturing those skills and supports and resources. Yes. So it's like trusting. That's the trust comes in for people to do the right thing with all that they have access to.
And we're starting earlier and earlier. So now the children in the early learning centre, you know, the 2 and 3 year olds, or not the babies yet, but the really young children down there, they're using that language. They're using the growth mindset, and I heard that story the other day where we talk about bucket filling. Have you heard about that? So you add to, the idea is to add to someone's bucket, not take from it.
Mm.
And, the 3-year-olds were talking about that stuff. You're taking from my bucket, positively, Mum, I filled their bucket today. So all of those things are not accidental. They are strategic, but they're based on core beliefs. I think that's what we're doing. And that's why we started the Early Learning Centre, was that we wanted to forge relationships with families as early as possible. Not to boss them around and tell them what to do, how to be parents, but to listen to them, to be aware of what their needs were and to step into that. And so we're seeing that that vision come to fruition. When I go down to if I walk past the ELC, they're hanging over the fence, Mr. White. And if you start with a conversation with one, you got 20. And I think that's what it's about, that they see you as a person and they know that you care for them. And so from there, they're on that point of whether, if you're punitive with children, well, that would, that's the problem with that. So, but we don't go easy on people. Like, if there's an issue, we deal with it strongly.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because a lot of teachers that tuned into our webinar were wondering, if I've got a kid acting out or disrupting classrooms, like, what do I do in that moment? And I'd love some practical examples from you, if you could, to share with those teachers.
Yeah, so as I say, like one of my deputies who's now a principal, he says, what you give out is what you get back. So that was his considered opinion of, what he'd learned over time. And so I think that's the issue, that you address the issue. And I know what you say about, my deputy and I spoke at a secondary school recently, and we weren't sure how what we were speaking about would go down with these secondary tough sort of teachers. And but they were really open to it. So when we talked about those values, they really got that. But one guy at the end, almost in a torturous way, he said, like, I get all of that, but what about when, that stuff you're talking about, growth mindset and all of that, what about when the kids are really naughty? And my answer to him was, well, that's when you really need to bring that to the table, because when everything's fine and dandy, you don't have to access those resources of problem solving and meeting them where they're at. So I think what it's about, what we do here, is that if there are problem situations, we address it. So we go in and work in the classroom with the teachers. We meet with the parents. So we do a lot of that, a lot of communication. So if something's happened, we don't sweep things under the carpet. We let everyone know. If someone's been hurt, we let both families know what's going on. And we're always working through with it. So I think that the tenor of what I'm saying is that we don't give up on anyone. And I think in the end, it reaches that critical mass where everyone understands that and they rejoice in that. So sometime if I'm speaking to a family who's been adversely affected, I'll say, I'll be talking about that and say, like, with your child at the moment, your child is the victim. But at some time in the future, your child may be the one in need. And I'm giving you the same guarantee that no matter what happens, we won't give up on them. So it might be behavioural, it might be medical, it might be social. This is part of life. And people, I think, interestingly, I don't know if it came out in another interview I did, that other families are incredibly empathetic about the situation that, say, a child who's experiencing problems and behaving not appropriately. Other families actually have a high level of understanding about that. I think they can see, there, but for the grace of God go I, that so more than, maybe the pub talk would say, well, throw the book at them, kick them out, that kind of stuff. I think most people, there is more empathy than that. And it's, learning is relational, change is relational. That's the standard we set for ourselves. And it's not easy. And I don't mind saying that I'm continually reflecting on what I do. And so many things, as you can imagine, in a large institution like this, the very last thing you want to happen happens. So there could be two children who have an issue, and the last thing you want to do is for that to be replicated, but it happens. That's and one of my favourite saying is, that's community. So when things that happen where you shake your head, you just have to say to yourself, well, that's community. So good and the bad. Community is fantastic, but also community is challenging. So there are, as I said, there are no easy answers. But we're the same as any other school. As I said, we don't have all the answers, but we do have a strong game plan, and we have strong values underpinning our action.
So you've got the foundations there, the resources, the relationships to be able to have those, safe and open communication between student, between family, between teacher, between other students. That makes a lot of sense, because you can't kind of wait until the problem arises to start treating it. It's got to be foundational. That makes sense.
And learning is the ultimate distraction.